Well, tracking Justin Trudeau's tyranny is a full-time job. Luckily, we have a man who makes it his full-time job to track Trudeau's tyranny. David Creighton from Human Events writes over at Post Millennial from time to time, and journalist joins us now. David, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Very nice to be back, Clayton.
So we wanted to have you on because on Thursday night, the Trudeau government passed their latest bill, and it's, of course, a bill that we've been watching. We've been watching a series of bills over the past year in Canada, since going to censor the Canadian people and basically taking away free speech in that country. That passed Thursday night. Can you walk us through what the bill was or is and what this will mean for free speech in Canada?
Well, what's going on right now is a threefold attack on basic freedom of speech in Canada. What happened last Thursday was the passage of Bill C-18, which is aimed at big tech, as the Liberals like to say, but it's really about the Internet Extortion Act, is what I call it. It's going to force social media to pay Canadian news outlets to run Canadian stories on social media. Now, Meta has already come out and said, "No way, we're going to stop running Canadian stories." So it's technically called the Online News Bill. Now the Online News Act. And all of these bills have innocuous sounding names, but what they are all about is just stripping Canada of free speech. And prior to C-18 passing, the Online Streaming Act, which was Bill C-11, passed. And that demanded that all independent news providers or news providers in general have Canadian content regulations. So that's going to hit a lot of YouTubers out there who are not going to have enough Canadian content to stay on the air. And this goes back to an obsession with the Liberal Party that goes back decades, with this obsession with Canadian content at the detriment of free speech. And for a while, this obsession died down because there simply was so much information available on the internet, on cable news, that it was no longer necessary to dictate that there had to be so much Canadian content, because there was a proliferation of Canadian content. But there's something sinister about this. Why are they insisting that the internet now reflect the Liberal Party's view of Canadian content? Why are they insisting that social media pay for Canadian news? I mean, I've been working in online news now for the past 7 years. My salary always went up when Facebook and Twitter and other social media ran my stories. So this is reverse psychology. Canadian media are going to start losing money if social media withdraws from Canada. Not to mention the fact that we're going to become increasingly isolated,
right,
and increasingly in danger of not knowing what's happening outside of our borders, because we're not going to have access to social media. And Meta has already said it's on the way to withdrawing from Canada.
I just don't understand why they would think that Facebook and Twitter would pay the CBC for their news content, or I guess, or even independent creators for their news content. They don't have to do that. I mean, you're getting to use their platform ostensibly for free. Why would they care? And you're right. I think this is going to lead to an isolation. Although, of course, it seems like these lawmakers are saying, no, this is going to help Canadian media. This is going to help Canadian media. What's their rationale for that?
Well, it's strictly the argument that they're going to get a few dollars from social media. This appealed initially to a lot of the legacy media in Canada, what's left of it. And it's astounding if you look at what is actually left of the legacy media. 99% of the daily newspapers in this country are owned by Post Media. And Post Media said, what a great idea, because Post Media is going downhill fast. It's going bankrupt. And they thought, what a nice way to pick up a few dollars. It's not going to be enough dollars to stay in business. They have got to refocus and repackage what they're doing. New media is the future. And of course, new media, I hesitate to say they're all small c conservative, but I say they're small c common sense outlets,
Right.
where they actually have a plan to exist in the modern world. Legacy media is still very much living in the 1970s and 80s, before the internet essentially took over media as we know it. And they refuse to adapt. They refuse to evolve. They refuse to become a part of how media works today. And so they think they can break even by extorting some money from social media.
I mean, what stands out to me is no one's going to be left, because none of these companies are going to pay. They're not going to pay Facebook. Facebook and Twitter are not going to pay for this content. And so what's going to happen is you're not going to have a Canadian voice on any of these platforms anymore, except the official, I guess, press releases that come out of the Trudeau government. I mean, what else is going to be represented on social media from a media perspective? And it'll just be the voices of the regime, basically, shared across social media. They've already clamped down.
That is the stark and very dark truth of this. That's what it's all about. We are becoming like China in terms of having only Liberal Party approved media, thank you very much, is what Canadians can watch and listen to. And it's extremely dangerous. But I tell you, the worst is yet to come. And the third part of Trudeau's what he calls his online agenda, and that's exactly what it is. It's an online agenda, but it's also an attack on free speech. And that's the Online Safety Act. Now that sounds just wonderful. What could be worse than safety?
Right.
But that, of course, is what's coming next. And that is going to be Trudeau's attack on hate speech and misinformation/disinformation. That's the next part of this. That's the scariest part. He is going to make that essentially illegal or subject to massive fines. And this is happening right now in Australia. As I speak, they are grappling with the same legislation. They're about 6 months ahead of us. And they are introducing their version of the Online Safety Act right now. And it's frightening, because the question is, who defines what hate speech is? And who defines what disinformation is? Well, I'll tell you, it's going to be the Trudeau government, or it's going to be the Liberal government who makes that call. And anything that they disagree with is going to be hate speech. You heard how Trudeau talked about the Freedom Convoy. Racist, misogynist, hate speakers.
Right.
They would be banned. Trudeau wants to ban anything he disagrees with. Any news or information that he deems bad for his Liberal government. And I think this is absolutely frightening. And I've looked through the coming legislation, because for the last year, the Liberal government has been doing study groups in terms of how this legislation is going to be introduced and what it's going to entail. They've already tried to introduce it 3 or 4 years ago, but it was just before the summer recess of the Parliament, so it's been reintroduced in the current session. It will come up for debate and vote in the next fall session. And what it really amounts to, though, is that Canada will be a country without free speech, because hate speech can mean just about anything. You can consider Karl Marx to be the author of hate speech because he hated capitalists. But where do you begin and where do you end with a stupid concept like this? It is completely opposed to 500 years of British, Canadian, American jurisprudence and freedom of speech. This is what we fought for, is the right to speak our minds and not to have the government tell us to shut up because we disagree with that, and we're going to call that hate speech. And disinformation is even a larger problem, because anything can be described as disinformation. And we saw this last weekend with all of the crap that was coming out about this Ukrainian coup d'etat, or the Russian coup d'etat. The Ukrainians were on board with this. the U.S. press was largely pretending that this was some kind of huge development. Canada was there, Britain was there,
right?
And that was all, of course, a lot of misinformation,
Right.
but not according to this government. That's the truth, and
right. Who's policing those guys?
Dangerous.
When you have on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, you have the front page of the Atlantic newspaper, this is a civil war. Well, that's all. That was false. That's disinformation. But hey, who's going to police these people? And I just want to ask, I mean, I kind of think about, as a YouTuber myself, as a video content creator, what does this mean for independent journalists, independent creators? Because we already know that there's a war against independent content creators, but particularly among the Trudeau government, we heard their contempt, or his contempt, for independent media. You're not an actual news organization. He wags his fingers at certain news organizations, independent news organizations. So publishing content, what will they have to do? What will they have to think about? Or will they not be able to publish really anymore in the way that they used to?
Well, new media was diametrically opposed to this legislation, C-18, which is the law of the land right now. It's being implemented. They were opposed to this because they know they drive up their readership on social media. I mean, it's just so bloody obvious. I don't know how anybody cannot see this. Anyone who's worked in media today knows that that's the lifeblood of media today, is getting your story out on social media so millions of people can see it.
Right.
And that's not going to happen. So, and they haven't got the money to litigate with social media to find some kind of happy medium, some kind of deal, which is what the Liberals are saying they should do. So they're saying, no, we don't want to hire a bunch of lawyers to find some deal with social media that's not even going to help us in the end. Everybody is going to get hurt by this. And it's going to be even worse with the online safety, because how is it going to affect people who watch Redacted every day? How is it going to affect people who watch my channel, Clayton's Right, I do stuff critical of the Liberal government every day? Is that going to be deemed disinformation because it's contrary to the Liberal policies? Of course it will. I can't see any way around it. And interestingly enough, the people who are framing this coming online safety bill admit, and I have found the testimony, and I've written about this in Human Events and elsewhere, they admit they cannot define disinformation, and that they don't want to define disinformation because that will curtail their ability to enforce this law at random, because that's what it's all about. They just want to put new media out of business because it tends to be more conservative than the legacy media, and they want to stop people from voicing their opinion. It is that simple. It is an attack on free speech that is as sinister as anything out of Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia or China today. And it's absolutely frightening what's happening.
And you know that this is exactly what the World Economic Forum wants. You know that the Biden administration and others are probably sitting back watching this very closely. How do they pull this off? How can we also do it in the United States to the best of our ability and clamp down? I mean, they've already done it. A lot of these mainstream media platforms are already censoring and blocking and taking channels down left and right. We've had friends lose their channels recently for telling the truth. And it's really, really sad. Really, really sad. And that's happening in the United States already. So, David Clayton, thank you so much for this. We appreciate you keeping an eye on the tyranny that is the Trudeau regime up there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure joining you today.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.